turn your camera off so we can see Graeme and Martin, our speakers for today. Thank you for being here with us. But before I give you the floor, a bit of context. So it's been a very intense summer with fires in the forest, no rain, and that made global warming quite real, right? And I heard at the news, the TV news, that 1/5 of French people, they claim that they have realized this global warming issue after this summer. So sustainability is more than ever a hot topic and a concern for more and more people, and it's really critical for any business and organization to embrace it. Graeme and Martin are from InSites. So it's a consulting partner of Purina, making consumer centricity an everyday reality for our brand. So today is really about consumer perspective. They will use an intensive piece of research they conducted to tell us more about what sustainability means to consumers, then what consumers do versus what they say. And we know there is a gap. And finally, how brands can communicate efficiency about it. So Graeme, Martin, you will share for about 45 minutes. Attendees, you can post any question in the chat as we go. We'll have hopefully 10 minutes at the end to take the question in a Q&A. So without further ado, I'm handing over to you, Graeme and Martin. Can you please first introduce yourself and share your screen? Up to you now.
No problem. Just go back. Just sharing the screen, and then I'll get my head on. Oh, can we see the screen?
Yes, we can see.
Good. Well, hi there, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and we're really looking forward to talking to you today. As Valerie said, my name is Graeme Lawrence. I'm joined by Martin Bryant. We work for an organization called InSites Consulting. We're a global market research, market insight business, and we have a very strong relationship with Nestle as a whole, and obviously Nestle Purina. I'm the global head for the work that we do for Nestle, and Martin is the European head of that work. This is a bit of a repeat and a bit of a juggle around of work that we have done with Purina over the last few months, and we've done a similar session not too long ago with them that they pointed us towards Valerie to potentially come along and talk to you today. So as I say, it's a real pleasure to be here to do so. We're going to do this as a sort of double header. You're going to hear, I guess, the narrative, the kind of rationale, the context from the consumer perspective from me, and Martin's going to be the voice of the examples that we're seeing play out in the pet care environment. So you'll get used to the kind of format and the rhythm of how we talk about this. And as Valerie said, any questions please in the chat ideally, but we will definitely come on to them at the end. So we talk about conscious consumption. This is really all about the consumer perspective around the whole narrative on sustainability. We're going to reference data in the deck today that is a little bit older. It is at the back end of 2020, but it's all incredibly relevant. We do countless pieces of work on this, and a lot of it would be in a situation where the consumer research that we do is kind of private to the client. But we can reassure you that this data is very much live, and you'll see we'll use this data as the context to tell you and highlight the great examples that we've found out there in the market, in the pet care market, to kind of help guide you to think about what this means to you and the context for you and your world overall. So we will reference the data, this data, but we'll also be referencing other qualitative data. We've done countless pieces of stakeholder interviews, etc. So as I say, we're using that as the framework to talk you through a narrative overall. And it's European work that we'll use today. But actually, interestingly, with Valerie mentioning that the Unleashed is moving into other parts of the world, we've got this globally as well. So we can point you in directions afterwards on our website, etc., to some global aspect if that's important to you. So where are we at? Well, Valerie just teed it up. Yeah, we've had a summer, haven't we? In terms of the news that we're hearing. I mean, obviously the latest out of Pakistan in the last few days as well around the monsoons, etc., just shows that we cannot ignore what's going on. And we've kind of all moved, and we've been moving, and consumers have been moving from a kind of an eco-worrier mindset to much more an eco-warrior mindset. And we've certainly seen this with the younger generation skipping classes in the sort of Greta Thunberg kind of campaigning aspect of that. So this is a very hot topic for consumers overall, and that's the context that we're playing with here. We find that virtually all consumers are saying that sustainability is important, and it's on the rise overall. We're also finding that people are very much picking up on the climate change aspect, with 3/4 saying climate change is an important issue, and 66 playing as serious an issue as COVID. So, we basically have a consumer mindset, which is the fact that this is hugely important to them. And look, it doesn't take a lot of work to kind of highlight the fact that this is utterly true. Is very much the situation that we're seeing. I don't know if you've come across this on the line. It's a bit of a favorite from mine in terms of kind of highlighting the problem here, but Country Overshoot Day is a very interesting way of looking at this, to say, well, look, if we actually used up all the resources in the world, what day would those resources of our planet be used up by country? And you can see here that with some situations were really only very early into the year when they've already used up their proportion of resources. And in fact, the 3 planets on the side that they've highlighted there is a nice one for a statistic for dinner parties or whatever, is to say, if Europeans continue to live like they do, they would actually need 3 planets worth of resources. We are overusing, we are absolutely destroying, and we're ruining our planet overall. And it's something we need to solve. It's beginning to be realized. It's beginning to be much more realized that sustainability is not about is now about not just about doing less harm, but actually changing this and trying to correct the situation. And that is where we're at. And interestingly, industry thought leaders, and a term, the triple bottom line, was one that was used by a thought leader from 25 years ago in the 90s, a fellow called John Elkington, basically highlighted the fact that we now need to move not from a situation of managing this situation, but actually into, with his new book, we are having a regenerative situation. We need to restore, we need to replenish, we need to make up for the things that we've been doing overall. And there's not a lot of trust for governments to do this, and it's obviously for big organizations to play a part as well. It's a huge deal. And work from the likes of John and from the likes of Paul Polman, who used to be chief executive at Unilever, is really highlighting the fact that we've all got to try and play a part in this regeneration situation. And I think it'll be very interesting to start seeing more regenerative language coming through, restoring, replenishing, rethinking language coming through, rather than just this sort of quite sort of quick use of the word sustainability. We are in that situation now. And we need to do this. We need to restore, and we need to replenish what we've lost. We need to rethink these systems, and we all need to play a part in that. And and I think that's down to all organizations, etc., to show the way to the governments that are probably struggling to do that. Martin, a little example.
Yeah, thank you, Graeme. So yeah, and nice to meet you all. And as Graeme said, as we go through, I'll be illustrating what Graeme's saying with some examples, all from the world of pet care. So our first example here speaks to what Graeme was saying about regeneration and restoring. So Sheba, talk about the channel that grows coral. So essentially they're investing in restoring coral reefs around the world by investing in reef stars, which are little steel structures built by local communities that form a solid base for coral to regrow across the world. And not only are they doing this, but they're also showing that there is some benefit for them as well, of course, in that they have a YouTube channel which people can watch with advertising, and for every view they get, they then invest more in this as well. So they're taking a positive stance, but also driving, sort of their own agenda in terms of sort of seeing that people see what they're doing as well.
Thanks, Martin. So how does this play out? How do we start making sense? How do we all play our part in this overall? What's the mindset that's going on here? If you ask consumers what they understand by sustainability as a term, and you ask that in a very open way, you get a very open set of answers. And this is a busy slide. And to be honest, the reason it's a busy slide is because it's kind of busy in the minds of consumers. It starts becoming a sort of a very broad, much broader concept to them overall. And this is the changing narrative that we're living with. And I think we're all conscious of our own examples of understanding that and having that own mindset ourselves. After all, we're all consumers too, out there, even if we are in the business of trying to act sustainably. In the heart of this, you've got what has probably been the most traditional kind of aspect and the core aspect of what sustainability means to consumers, and that's about being better for the planet. And the whole environmental thing has obviously been a big sort of mainstay of what sustainability means. But consumers are seeing that and thinking about that in different terms as well now, and have been now for a period of time. And to the left-hand side, you're seeing much more around the whole ethical aspect, to the social aspect, better for them, better for the community aspect. So not just better for the planet. And that's where you start getting into things like fair trade, etc. On the right-hand side, and this has been a kind of a little bit of a post-pandemic aspect to this in terms of the story and the narrative in the consumer mindset, is the health component, better for me. Where does this start playing through, and how do these all play together? It's confusing, and it's confusing for consumers. If you take a very simple example, you might have a retail environment selling a cucumber, but that cucumber might be wrapped in plastic for good reason to keep it fresh, when actually that's going to play out nicely in the sense of being best situation for the supply chain. But in a consumer's mind, they're like, why has that got plastic on it when it's been highlighted to be organic, or it's highlighted to be ethically produced? So consumers are finding this as a holistic concept, but in the head of the consumer, they're like, are you acting, organizations, and we're all playing a part in that, how are you acting to kind of help me understand that and through that? And that's where it starts becoming quite complicated, because we're looking at massive change in business models, massive changes in commercial structures and supply chain structures, which I'm sure you're all thinking about out there. But you can also see it from, if you put your consumer hat on, I guess we can all see that as well, in terms of how it's playing through. How's this translating? How are we finding that this is translating for brands and organizations out there? We're seeing two kind of key things, and you might have heard this mentioned previously. You're kind of seeing the shield and the sword kind of component to sustainability strategies. The defensive shield aspect is much more kind of maybe what consumers expect from you. They probably expect you to be doing that straight away, and we'll come on to some examples of that. Whereas the differentiation might be newer things, newer aspects that they're seeing from you, looking for from you as this narrative changes, maybe around things like health, or maybe around things like the social components, etc. So we're finding that there's a kind of a sort of almost a must-do component, or certainly must-consider component, and then moving to more of a differentiation as well, potentially in there. So Martin, a quick example.
Yeah, so exactly. So I think Portland Pet Food are interesting in that they're hitting on the three factors that Graeme mentioned in terms of better for the planet, better for your health, and better for society as well. So what they're doing there, they basically, from a waste perspective, they have food that is shelf stable for more than 2 years. So trying to prevent waste there, make sure that there's more longevity and less throwing away. As well, in terms of being better for their health, it's all natural, no preservatives, no additives. They make that sure that's a very big part of their offer. So from your animal's perspective, it's healthy. But also, of course, they then look to reinvest profits as well. So 5% of their net profit is given to animal shelters. So they're covering that social aspect as well. And that's very much what's in their communication. So they're acknowledging that sustainability has multiple meanings for people and addressing each of those, which is a really interesting move.
And then another one?
Yeah, so this is very much an example of, even if you're in the product space, you can move into services to a degree and partner and show that you're doing the better for society piece here. So this is a collaboration between Pedigree and a company called Colenso. This is based in New Zealand, and it's almost like a digital dating style platform for prospective dog owners and dogs, and it's looking to match you with a rescue dog that fits from your lifestyle and your sort of current behaviors, because they've noticed that when dogs get returned to rescue homes or to dog centres, a lot of it is because people choose dogs for superficial reasons, because they think the dog looks cute, they like the look of it, but they haven't really thought through, does that dog actually fit my lifestyle? So this is trying to make those matches there to make it more of a sustainable ownership model for dogs. So that's interesting that Pedigree, this big brand here, are not just talking about their sustainability from the point of view of what they're doing in packaging and product, but also trying to have a social impact.
Thanks, Martin. So what are the top of mind sort of spontaneous associations if we try and put it into some number terms? And as I said before, this is slightly older data, but it's almost translating that messy slide, if you like, into the things that consumers bring up overall. And I think the top of mind aspect we really are finding is around CO2. And I think we are getting into that aspect of the defensive shield needs to consider the carbon aspect of what we're doing as organizations. And we've seen some of these things come out of COVID-19 around the clean air and people enjoying it, etc. overall. But we're also seeing these other themes coming through that might be the differentiators a little bit more when it comes to the kind of restoring, replenishing, preserving, moving to giving back, if you like, overall. So yeah, that CO2 component is definitely there. It's core component of the defensive shield. I think everyone kind of needs to think about where they play in that overall. So here's an example from Martin.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is Good Pet Food. So it's the first German dog food brand to get an ethical award for sustainability. How they achieved this? Very simply by trying to make their CO2 emissions during production as low as possible, but also then at the same time offsetting. So they're doing that sort of defensive part as well in terms of basic tree planting. So every time they produce, they plant trees. So that actually what they're aiming for is CO2 neutrality, and they're achieving that as well, hence the recognition of that ethical award.
Thank you. Recycling and reducing packaging is massively there in the consumer mindset. Very sensitive to this situation overall. So another quick example.
Yes, it's really interesting. So this is from a retailer perspective, so Pets at Home. So this is UK based, and noticing from a consumer perspective, consumers really like food pouches for their dogs and their cats because they're convenient and they're usually quite sort of signify of quality. But what they don't like so much is the plastic waste that comes with that. The issue being that in the UK, a lot of the local councils don't have the ability to recycle this type of plastic. So what Pets at Home do is they offer a facility whereby you can take back your pouches to Pets at Home and they will send it off to somewhere in the UK that does have the capability to recycle. So therefore you can feel less guilt when you're using these pouches because they're actually going to be cared for properly, that they wouldn't be able to if you just put them in your bin at home.
Thanks, Martin. Another one that's kind of up there in the consumer mindset overall is reducing food waste. And I think this is one that maybe starts to link a little bit more to the differentiation component as opposed to the shield component, if you like, because this could be an up and coming kind of opportunity.
Yeah, and got two examples here. The first one is Shameless Pets. So what's interesting with this is that it's upcycling. So what they've done here is transforming what they talk of as misfit produce or kind of surplus produce that's perhaps a bit, like wonky vegetables, and making that into high quality treats for dogs, which are also supposed to be quite healthy as well. And moving on to the next slide as well, I think there's there's a great example of the fact that Purina are doing this as well. So with Aventuros already looking at the upcycling phenomena and how they can turn that to their advantage. So what they've done here is they're transforming, they're upcycling surplus brewery grains into treats and products, and they've been looking at this as in recent years, in 2021, in fact, as a minimum viable product, and releasing that on limited scales in some European markets and getting some consumer feedback in markets. So a great way of saying at a smaller scale, let's see if we can make this work for us as a big organisation. So really positive to see Purina doing this as well.
So that's the first part of our presentation. We've basically given you sort of a context here overall. We've moved from that that sort of definitions we'd seen in the past to much more around regeneration, replenishing, having to give back to the situation overall. But what does that mean for consumers? We've highlighted it's a holistic concept. We've highlighted it's about the planet, but it's also about society. It's also about for them, and that kind of sort of stretch across those different components make it feel quite holistic for them. Then we've talked about at the top level the fact that you're either using a defensive shield or you're using much more of a sword differentiated opportunity for your brand strategies. That's the context. Let's move on to the next part of our presentation. what does it actually kind of mean to consumers? Where are they exactly at with this overall? So we've kind of set the scene, but what do we mean more specifically? Well, most would say that they would like to do something about this. Yeah, we find in 2/3 in our previous data, and this is actually going up because we've got other data that we can share, but we don't know this is going up. People want to do more overall. The interesting thing is, well, about half of people clearly will say that they are living sustainably, but only about 16% say the opposite. There is a big group in the middle who are going, I think I'm trying, I'm not sure, I'm not quite sure what to say, because it is quite complicated for them. The other component part is that we know, and it keeps coming out, and this is obviously a massive challenge now with the whole affordability situation that we're in, with the economic situations that we're in at the moment, is that 71% say they'll pay more, but the 67% also say we should not have to pay more. So there's a thing going on here around the kind of component of how consumers are going to interact with brands on this. So what are in their kind of sustainable habits? What sort of things are they doing overall? And we're seeing a lot around food waste and leftovers being a kind of a key thing. Now, this came out of the pandemic a little bit, but we only are seeing that enhanced with some of the challenges around affordability at the moment as well, and people trying to manage their food. And that moves not just to sort of human food. We also know that that's very, very relevant within the situation of pets and pet owners. We see the plastic bags, we see the plastics coming through as well overall. That's a big part of it. It's in that core bit of that mindset that we see in the open-minded way. So the plastic demon is still there. It's very much top of mind for consumers. They're looking for this to be pretty much part of the defensive shield, I think. You know, they're looking for organizations to do their best around plastic and to take plastics out of the system if possible.
Yeah, we've got some really interesting examples here as well. So this is Wonelli, this is an Australian-based company. And what they're doing here is they're trying to get this away from plastic totally. So only use for plastic-free dog. They're the only plastic-free dog company, well, they claim to be in Australia, essentially. And how they do this, they use cane pulp as their packaging material. So it's completely compostable. So yeah, so very, very kind of firm commitment to removing plastic there. And great news, of course, there is that's something that Purina is also doing with looking to move to mono material pouches on two of its biggest brands, one being Gourmet Mon Petit, the other one being Felix Soups. So really positive that, you know, these are, as being monoplastic, the great thing there is that they are completely recyclable. So really, really positive step there as well.
Another one, kind of linked to the kind of whole consumption aspect as a whole. Another one that we see is coming through, and we think it's interesting to highlight to you today, maybe in this kind of differentiation space, is the kind of aspect around eating less meat. And the fact is that we're seeing that as a trend overall. 55% say my own eating habits have been changed by the environment. There's definitely a trend here. The younger people are definitely moving to more flexitarian diets, and we know that this is translating into pet owners and the considerations for what pets are being fed as well. So the whole kind of veganuary thing is translating into your environment and in translating into your category and industry too.
Yeah, absolutely. And Yora is a good example here. So they're seeing themselves as like completely vegan-based animal food, in that they very much aware of the fact that, you know, farming has a sustainability impact. So they're looking to use insect protein instead, but not only just insect protein. It's also melded with vegetables that are grown locally, and they're choosing vegetables such as sort of potatoes and sort of grains that need less water and less energy to grow. So really trying to reduce their environmental impact, but create what they claim is a tasty product. And Purina, again, great to see that there's an example there as well with Beyond Nature's protein. So again, using alternative proteins, could be insects, also plant proteins such as fava beans and millet. So as well, moving away from the intensive farming model that's needed to provide pet food traditionally. And of course, taking this further, there's also a company called Because Animals, which is a biotech that is looking to make nutritionally complete plant and or cell cultured based dog food. So essentially lab grown meat, basically. So providing meat for people who perhaps feel they want to still feed their animals meat for think, people often think that, that's perhaps wrong to give an animal a vegan diet, but doing that in a way that's still sustainable. So trying to address that need there.
Thanks, Martin. Some really interesting examples there. Valerie mentioned it up front. The reality is, though, we do get a say-do gap. We basically find that a lot of consumers say they want to buy purpose-driven brands, advocating sustainability, but there's also an admission that they don't necessarily always do so. Yeah, so we do have that say-do gap with consumers. They say they want to do it, but they find it hard to do it overall. Convenience is often seen as the main enemy of sustainability. Certainly when it comes to kind of human consumption, it's a massive aspect around this. It's often out there and labelled in such a way, I can't manage to do it. It doesn't fit with my lifestyle. I need to be kind of able to manage that in such a way. We go along with that, but we also think there are other components at play here that if you can combine them and work through the ease component, I think it can work out really well for organizations. Affordability is certainly there. We've highlighted that earlier on by saying that there is a situation where, can we make these more affordable, these products? It's a tricky situation, and it might be, but, it needs to be considered in there for consumers. But the other ones that are also almost as equally interesting, I think, in certain aspects is the accessibility, the reminding and rewarding and education components. So all of these play a part. They're all in the mind of the consumer when they say, you know what, I'm finding this tricky because.
Yeah, and that's where Petsio are making a big contribution to helping overcome those affordability barriers. So what they offer is what they class as a sustainable subscription service for you to get what they see as, very sort of sustainable, eco-friendly and ethical food, and trying to do so in a way that's 100% natural and transparent, but also offering 2 different tiers of subscription, because often subscription services are seen as quite expensive, but they offer a lower price tier as well. So for example, it's their raw royalty tier, which they claim can therefore make you be able to feed your pet for just $1.88 per day. And Haniday is another example of this as well. So they're actually just another one that has like a subscription service there as well. And the reminding and rewarding part as well, they're very good at going out on social media. So they've got a partnership with Catherine Schwarzenegger Pratt, who is, a celebrity, very big in sort of an author as well, very big in terms of talking about sustainability and using her Instagram feed to promote that and keep reminding people as well of, how doing this can actually be very good for the planet. And then, of course, there's the education piece as well. So Jiminy is an insect protein pet food. And what's interesting there is that they encourage you to use their food by showing you the benefit it gives. So they have a calculator on their website. So you can go and you can give like the weight of your dog, how much you tend to typically feed them, how often you feed them in a day, and what sort of protein you currently feed them. What they'll then do is calculate that if you switch to Jiminy's, this is the difference you're going to make in terms of how much you save in terms of land used, water used, and in terms of greenhouse gases saved as well. So making it very tangible in terms of, yes, it might potentially cost a bit more to go to this, but this is what you're actually benefiting.
So thanks, Martin. That takes us to the sort of end of our second chapter. We've got one more chapter to show you, but just as a quick reminder, this kind of aspect around mindset versus habits is hard for consumers. They need to navigate this, they need to negotiate their way around this, but there is definitely a desire there. Convenience is definitely an enemy of sustainability, but there's more to it than just that. It's kind of about how you remote educate, it's about how you remind, it's about how you talk to the consumer and how affordable, etc. it is. Which takes us on to our final chapter, which is really about, well, how do you make this happen for you guys out there, for us in the world of business? How do we make this happen overall? The good news is that there is a recognition that sustainable brands are more up to date. People feel more positive about people who are talking about things such as carbon footprint. And we are also seeing that people are seeing that sustainable brands are having a higher quality. So there's a good business is good business backdrop here. If you take some academic work from the NYU Stern in the States, this is a sustainable market share index. This data is a little bit older, and when you look at the academic data, it is still catching up, which is often the way. But if you look at a sort of an ROI component about being a sustainably marketed product, NYU Stern are highlighting that categories that brands that are acting in a sustainable way, are marketing products and services in a sustainable way, are tending to be growing at a faster rate than those that aren't overall. And we can see there the pet food arrows on there. And interesting, the pet treat arrows. And I think it's interesting when we see quite a few examples are in the treat space, that there's something here about the treat component of the pet care industry seems to be a place where this sort of messaging and marketing seems to be playing through in a more powerful way. So if there's good business, how do we go about this good business? What is it that we kind of need to do at a top line level overall? First of all, there's the component of awareness and preference in there. Now, interestingly, if you look at Mintel data, taking us to the back end of last year, you can see that claims are growing in the pet food and pet product industries. Claims that are ethical and environmental are on the rise. So this is kind of happening. Yeah, there's an awareness thing going on out there. Yourselves and other organizations that are involved in this industry are beginning to make more of an ethical and environmental claim. So it's kind of just, you know, it's a part of the changing business models and narratives that I talked about in the kind of context section. The thing about it is you need to have a reputation, and you need to be careful about how you go about your branding and the marketing of your products overall. And you've got to be careful about what, you know, how that might play out overall, because consumers will boycott. There will be a boycott situation that happens if they don't see you acting in a sustainable way. And in particular, we see that in younger generations who are boycotting. So they're conscious of this. And we've shown this example to your friends and colleagues at Purina. You know, on social media, on TikTok, there are examples of young people out there highlighting some of the issues around some of the marketing messages that are out there from a big organization like Purina. So you will get called out, and we'll leave this in the deck for you to play afterwards. And so there's a reputation and license aspect that's really important here. The other component is, it's actually very interesting because it's leading to sort of some of the innovations and market developments that we've seen. And as we saw from the data previously about pet treat, here's an example that Martin will talk you through.
Yeah, so again, this is another retailer example. So we had the Pets at Home example previously in the UK, with them giving the facility to recycle products at the end of its life cycle. But also here, it's interesting that Coles in Australia, they have created this pet treat bar whereby you're reducing the amount of plastic waste at the beginning of the process in terms of you buying, whereby, you know, just go and take your own recyclable containers and do a bit of a pick and mix on treats. Interesting, actually, that they've done their research here as well. So to try and sort of like overcome the affordability basis at this early stage, they've done this in a suburb that, you know, spends 10% more in pets than the national average. So they're going to somewhere where they feel people are actually willing to spend a bit more to then sort of concept test this approach to then try and make it more widespread once it's established and known.
A really interesting one. The fourth component, which I won't dwell on too much, but it is an incredibly important part, and maybe for you to all think about for your own organisations, is that we do know there's an employee engagement part of this. Certainly younger generations are very keen to work for organisations who have meaning, who are working in a brand purposeful way, certainly have sustainability at the heart of their strategies. And we're seeing up to 60% of millennials claiming to choose an employer based on them being a brand and an organisation with sort of ESG and brand purpose at its heart. So it's a very interesting aspect here as well about the right type of staff working for organisations who are looking to do the right thing. So ultimately, kind of how do we go about kind of communicating and marketing then in this sort of whole backdrop that we've just highlighted? Because it's a tricky one, because consumers will say if you don't communicate, they don't think you're acting sustainably. So there's a to know you is to love you kind of aspect here. But as we've highlighted with the reputational part as well, there is an aspect there that you've got to be careful with around kind of looking like you're greenwashing and looking like you're sort of just saying it for the sake of saying it. So it's a tricky thing to navigate overall. So we're just going to go through kind of 4 rules for communicating very quickly to wrap up our presentation on that. And the first one we've got is to set the clear and long-term real commitment to this. Ultimately, we believe that you need to kind of lay this out at the start. And Martin.
Yeah, so this is an example from the Purina website, basically, in terms of setting out that long-term strategy and vision, and it's really crucial. So in terms of committing to the long-term vision here, this is part of the broader Nestle Net Zero by 2050 initiative. So setting out 4 very clear actions and goals. So it's sourcing ingredients sustainably, it's transforming the product portfolio over time to be more based on renewable, sustainable materials. It's evolving packaging as well. So getting to also, for example, the examples of Felix soups and Gourmet Mon Petit, where you're moving to mono materials. And also then it's driving efficient manufacturing and logistics. And I guess the thing that's really crucial there is about saying that these are the commitments and committing to them publicly, but also saying that, acknowledging that you're on a journey. So that's a really crucial tone there, in that saying that we're not there yet, but we're working towards it, and acknowledging that, and saying that therefore that does protect you a little bit against greenwashing, because you're saying that, you know, we're part of the process, we're not perfect yet, but we realize things need to change. And consumers tend to be more forgiving of that and more respectful of that as well.
Yeah, as Martin's alluded to, the consumers are looking to hear about this journey. They are, yes, a long-term strategy is a very good thing to see, but they want to hear about how they're going to get there. And they do comment about how brands talk too much about tomorrow. And quite often you'll say, oh, by 2030, we're going to be carbon this, or giving back in such a way, or replenishing in such a way. You've got to be really, really careful with that, because ultimately they want to see the steps in the process, and they will look for it overall. But here's a nice example.
Yeah, so this is Terra Canis. So this is trying to make an impact beyond natural ingredients and having some more initiatives in corporate sustainability. So what they're doing is they have a Save the Planet range of food, and from each 10 cents from each of these goes to initiatives around the world. So trying to see that there's problems around the world that need addressing. It could be in terms of like the main focus is being around sort of replanting trees, finding renewables, and also like sort of maintaining and sustaining the oceans. So similar to the Shiva initiative we opened with as well. So they're realizing that there's lots of different areas to address, and they're trying to address those where they can. And as well as that, they're also carbon offsetting whenever they're creating their product. So making sure that they're trying to be as carbon neutral as possible.
Yeah, really nice example of ongoing storytelling on the longer term commitment and the shorter term sort of aspirations. The other one is tricky. You know, it is one that's tricky to navigate, and it's about transparency. And this is where kind of the greenwashing kind of gets in there sometimes, and being open about the commercial motives of it. Ultimately, consumers understand that you're running commercial businesses. You know, they're often all related to themselves. So it's just trying to work with that transparency overall. But you know, they'll only, you know, trust companies that claim to be sustainable can be an issue. You know, it is something that needs to be negotiated, as I say, very carefully overall. You know, brands need to be transparent. They need to provide additional information about the sustainability messages that they're putting out there. They need to give as much as they can and be as open as possible.
So again, this is Wonelli, who you may remember from earlier with their sort of compostable packaging. They're also very good at terms of how they communicate with their consumers as well. So here is an example of their buffalo and fish recipe currently containing venison instead of buffalo, because they've been having issues sourcing buffalo. So they've been very open about the supply chain issues they faced, and saying that actually, no, there's a different ingredient about this, but we're being very honest, and so we're letting you know there's a different ingredient, and here's why. Because, you know, we're a commercial business, we face challenges as well, but we're looking to do our best for you in terms of how we address it. So again, it's showing that vulnerability, it's showing that you're not perfect, but this is what you're doing to help things. It really makes the consumer feel valued and listened to, and that they, you know, they're part of the journey with you.
Yeah, and you know, we hear this phrase flip side shopping. You know, it's definitely there. Consumers are in certain guises looking to understand what's gone into a product, where has it come from, how, you know, that accessibility and certifications are things that people are looking for. The tricky thing is, and I've done a lot of work into this, is when you do sort of an understanding of all the different eco labels that are available around the world, there's a current estimation that's well over 450, 460 kind of different labels and certifications that are existing. It's making it very awkward for consumers, and that's not ideal. But ultimately, it needs an education. If you are looking to do these kind of things, you might need to do that secondary level of education and understanding across to your consumers about what those eco labels mean overall. Another part, and a specific part, and I think it's interesting as a differentiation potentially, is that pet owners are definitely interested in, when they do the flip side shopping, to understand where the ingredients have come from. And this kind of the narrative, once again, about better for the planet, better for the society, etc., is very sort of relevant to considering whether it's locally sourced ingredients or not. And we're seeing, this is Mintel data, we're seeing from Mintel data that people would definitely be interested in products that are more locally sourced overall.
Yeah, just a few examples of these. Actually, you've got the Wildes Land, locally sourced in Germany, a German independent pet food company. You've got 100% Nordic, which is made in Finland, all ingredients sourced from Finland. And even in the UK, you've got Laughing Dog, which is a naturally complete food product for dogs, all sourced within the UK, and actually all sourced within Lincolnshire in the UK, so it's like hyper local there.
And as a final kind of wrap up on the kind of 4 rules that we would say is that it's really important to establish and maintain and manage and organize the tone of voice that you use around sustainability. We see quite often situations where sustainability messages are coming out from slightly different parts of the organization. Maybe it's coming out from the corporate office or from PR, and whereas marketing are maybe communicating in a different kind of voice. And it's something that needs to be considered and addressed and watched out for, sort of almost regardless of the size of your organization. But as you get bigger, you've got to be kind of conscious of that overall. So there's our 4 rules of communicating. We've taken you on a sort of a very whistle-stop tour around the whole thing. But as you remember, and hopefully maybe want to go back to and think about your own examples, they had 3 chapters. What does sustainability look like today for consumers, and how is that playing out in terms of brands and how they need to consider that? We went more detail into the conscious consumption mindset, the consumer mindset. What are the main things that are coming through? How are the consumers dealing with the aspects out there when it comes to their consumption and their purchasing and their behaviors? And then translated it into more thinking about it from your side of things, if you like, is how do we make good business good business? We gave you 4 rules for communicating and the 4 benefits of sustainable branding. So thank you very much for your time. We've really enjoyed it running through that for you. And we can have a look now at the chat. I can't see it when you're presenting. We'll have a look now at the chat for any questions. Maybe over to Valerie.
Yes, thank you very much, Graeme and Martin, for this presentation. Super clear. It's not my first time, but I'm always finding something new to think about in your presentation. That's very rich. Thank you very much for that. There are some questions and comments in the chat, so we'll start with that. So the first one was from Enme. Enme would like to ask your question. Turn your camera on, please.
Sorry, it's a bit slow, but here I am. So I think you already more or less answered my question, to be fair, but maybe there are some other insights that you want to share. So I think if we look at the affordability issues that we're facing with food right now, do we have an idea how this influences the, I guess, the conspicuous consumption numbers that we're seeing in terms of whether people, I guess, whether it's in the decision hierarchy or actually the portion of people who actually are willing to pay more for it?
Martin, have you got?
Yeah, I mean,
thinking of that recent study you've done.
We've done a recent study in confectionery. We see there are, and when doing that, we look at sort of different segments of consumers as well. Like we can sort of identify people like eco-actives and sustainability laggards, for example, and also sort of passive participants as well. And the passive participants are interesting because they're the sort of people who are not super engaged in sustainability, but will do it because in certain examples, it's actually cheaper to be sustainable if you're reusing, for example. So in those kind of circumstances, they actually see sustainability as a way to sort of address cost of living. But absolutely, you're right. I think there is the crisis coming up there is a chance that it does make it more difficult for people to be sustainable. But I think that's where we mentioned Petsio, for example, that sustainability subscription service, which offers different tierings, are trying to combat that, I think, really interestingly as well. And I think that, I guess, we do a lot of research for Nestle across all the categories. I guess the good news in pet care is that pet care is one of those categories that feels that it's slightly more recession proof. People are very sort of reticent to not pay as much for their animals, because, you know, if an animal likes a certain type of food, you don't really want to change it that much because you're scared that you're going to break its routine as well. So I think people are actually sometimes much more happy to shortcut their own budget than they are for their pets. So that's an interesting aspect there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, for this. So we have a little time left. So I guess there is a question from Karen about an interesting question, actually. I'll read through it very quickly. The inconvenient truth is that most people spend more time thinking about the attributes of their new washing machine than the attributes of a dog they adopt. Are you aware of any innovation that seek to change consumer long-term and sustainability mindset by education?
I mean, I'm not sure if you are, Graeme, particularly. I think beyond the example I gave of the pedigree collaboration with Colencio, that sort of dog dating app, that's the only one I'm currently aware of. But I think that was a really strong one in that it made it like a very intuitive interface, and really helping people to think, actually, no, if I'm choosing to own a pet, I'm not just going to do it because, you know, that's the cutest dog I've seen in the rescue centre, but actually I'm thinking about, does this dog's behavioural characteristics fit my lifestyle? You know, for example, is it a dog that is a bit more calm and therefore needs less sort of maintenance if I've got a busy working lifestyle, for example? So it's taking more things like that. Or have I got time to give this dog a walk, rather than will I take this dog home, realise it's a very energetic dog, but a very cute dog, and therefore I actually can't keep up and end up returning it. I think that's the key example we've seen, but unfortunately not aware of any beyond that really particularly.
No, I'm only conscious of that example, but maybe once again that Kieran, that highlights a bit of an opportunity, doesn't it, in terms of differentiation? Maybe there's an interesting space there, because I think in education terms, the mindset of consumers around the sustainability label is stretching more into thinking about those aspects, as we highlighted, and is only continuing to kind of expand in that sense of doing the right thing, as opposed to it just being something that maybe is linked to environment or whatever. So yeah, maybe an opportunity for, I'm sure there's I think unleashed companies out there that have got that opportunity. So
if I may, Graeme, can I send you something after this?
Yeah.
I have the answer. I promise you I have the answer.
Brilliant.
What a teasing. You are not telling us more about the answer? Can
I take the floor for a minute?
Yes, sure.
Okay, this is a project I've been working on for the last 2 years with 50 experts right across the spectrum, from veterinary defense, animal defense lawyers, dog trainers, and so on. And the crazy thing about this is the starting point is, if you wind the clock back 200 years to the first SPCA, which was in London. Now, the original thinking behind the SPCA was to have the owners of horses prove that they were resourced to take care of the animal. But as time went on, the entire animal welfare went down the charity model. So it's dependent on donations, it's dependent on voluntary labor. And to put this into perspective, the top 4 charities in America take in 700 million euros in dollars in donations every year. The puppy mills take that in pure profit every 33 days. And the difficulty of the entire system is, the original idea was for people to think before the animal changed hands, but the entire model we have now is how we mop up the problem after the dog has arrived. And it's a disaster. So I have something, I've looked at all the ways to attack the problem, from how you get around the difficulty of the child asking for a dog and the parent having to give an answer. And we have a perfect solution there. And we also have something very simple that would educate every single volunteer in a rescue shelter. Now, we have the backing of a major EdTech corporation who have 100 million in turnover backing us on this. So I'd love to talk to you, Graeme. And just before I cut out, this was a fantastic presentation from the two of you lads. If you were soccer players, you have the intuition.
Yeah. I'm not sure which one's the striker and which one crossed the ball, but there we go. Yeah, I mean, I think to take it broader, Valerie, I mean, I think the point here is that business models are getting challenged. This is the issue. This is the bigger issue on this. And especially as we move into the case of it being a more regenerative capitalism that we need to see. And as market researchers, we speak to consumers, we're consumer researchers. We are seeing a very changing nature of the briefs coming out of large organizations to understand where brand purpose, how do they change their business models to brand purpose, and where does that meet with consumers? So that's just a specific example from Kieran. But the point is here that business models are changing. You guys in the collective that you're in are part of that pushing up, and lots of different touch points will change these things to help organizations change.
Thank you very much for the very interesting discussion. I'm moving to the next topic just because I'm conscious there is 6 minutes left, and very interesting comment in the chat. So from Joe. So Joe, one of our insight experts, commented first that inflation is now the #1 global consumer concern. Sustainability being maintained, of course, as a concern versus increasing. Andrea, you posted a question about the current shortage of animal feeding that might push the adoption of non-animal protein for pets. And Joe, you replied to this question. Can you give the reply live, please?
Yeah, sure. I was just saying, yeah, it kind of likely will if there is no other choice. I think it's one of those things. If consumers are forced to make a change, then they will adapt, and we have seen that in other categories and with other issues. But I think it's probably more likely what consumers will do is shift to other products and brands that still satisfy their needs. That means that they are not removing animal proteins. There is a big obstacle to overcome from a consumer perspective in relation to the taste and nutrition of products, the physical needs of their pets, which means there is this real kind of reticence to kind of make changes to their pets' diet. So in the first instance, why they still have choice, I think they'll move around products and brands. If forced into making changes, then I think they will be more likely to make that behavior change. But the key thing for anything that we do when we are working on alternative proteins and selling that kind of side of sustainability and being good for your pet, good for the planet, is reassuring that there is no compromise on your pet's health and happiness, because that's fundamental, and still the key drivers of the category is taste and nutrition, and a balanced form for that for consumers.
Yeah, definitely. And we've seen that in all the pieces of research we did, of them.
Everything, in everything. There is always a small group who are really keen to be those early adopters and try things out and be quite open. But even with that small group, they're still, as long as they will eat it, as long as they're healthy. But yeah, it's still an obstacle to overcome.
Thank you very much for all those insights, Joe. Checking in the chat, so I can see still a question from you, Kim. Would you be happy to ask the question live? We still have time.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, great talk. I really learned a lot. I was just wondering, because you've brought in like 10 or 15 parameters that consumers think about on how they can contribute to the sustainable future. Are there any couple of top ones that are actually more impactful than the rest? I was just wondering whether that may change in the near future.
And shall I start, Martin? I think maybe you come in. I think from our work, Kim, and Martin alluded to sort of segmentation of different profiles of people, as Joe has just done as well. I think it does differ by different types of consumer overall. And I think you can see that almost in the nature of some of the data charts, which show they're not that differentiated, they're not that stretched out when you give them the options overall. And I think that's that aspect of it being, it's quite easy for it to become a holistic mindset for a consumer. because one thought trips into another thought. You know, I don't want to use plastic. Oh, I want to make the best of food waste. Oh, I want to make sure it comes from the community. I want to, and they all trip into each other, and it's very confused. And that's why it makes it quite tough for organizations. But I do think it's about that aspect of the shield and sword kind of thinking for an organization is a good start point to say, well, I need to at least cover the main thing around plastics or the main thing around CO2, because they're right top of mind. And maybe I differentiate more from the perspective of thinking about some of the things we've just been talking about, maybe meat-free and proteins and or something like that, or differentiate with local ingredients. So I think if I was sort of running organization, whether it be, you know, startups or whether it to be to the bigger globals, you've got to still think of that balance of shield and sword. And I guess that's why that's come through as a terminology in corporate land, you know, sword and shield. But not easy because they're not far from each other. But I think it's about making a call and going for it. If I was one of your Unleashed or, you know, members.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Graeme. We are at the end of this talk. Unfortunately, I'm sure we could have spent another 30 minutes discussing about the topic. There may be new news soon because of the current situation, global warming, as we said at the beginning. If you were to go back to consumers now, ask them, maybe we could see a few things accelerating, and we already know about that. Thank you very much for all the attendees. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned. I hope you've been inspired. Stay tuned for the next Unleashed talk. And with that, thank you again, Martin and Graeme, for joining and sharing very spontaneously, very openly. Thank you so much for that. And with that, I wish you all a very good afternoon. Take care.
Thanks, Valerie. Take care, everyone. All the best.